Tucker Carlson, eh? There he was, the big right-wing Trump fan, holding forth in convention centres full of crowds cheering. He was like some sort of evangelical preacher rousing the masses, sermonising to his true believers that the Australian government was full of criminals. To quote him, a tyranny. We live in a tyranny, he said. Now, we do this stuff so that you don't have to do it because, believe me, it's painful having to listen to little old Tucker Carlson and his cackling little girly laugh. Why don't you look in your own backyard, champion? In a moment, we'll get to the moral of this story. And the moral is, thanks to the breakdown and the failure of the mainstream media globally, it's given rise to popular demagogues, and this guy is the number one. Demagogues whose impact on politics will be of significant, if not immense, influence, particularly as Tucker's rantings are mostly aligned with Rupert Murdoch's. Even though he was sacked by Murdoch on Fox News, there seems to have been a difference over Putin because Tucker adores Vladimir and Rupert does not. Otherwise, they're pretty much on the same platform. But this is a further threat to the mainstream media, already cravenly co-opted by corporations and political agendas. And if you watch ABC Media Watch this week, Paul Barry did the financials on the TV networks. They are really in trouble. And newspapers, well, who would buy the Herald Sun or the Daily Telegraph? Who would pay for that behind a paywall? Back to Tucker. Now, I can't watch this stuff because, the half-truths and the outrage and the outright dead-set lies and the laugh, the little squeal-like cackle. But here are some takeaways. You've got to love it. Here are some takeaways.
And so if it becomes too difficult, too expensive for your children to buy a house in the country they were born in, you're erased. That's it. Your line ends. And that's what's happening. You see it in the birth rates. This is true in my country too. This is not lecturing you. I'm watching this happen. And in Canada, it's completely out of control. So why is it happening? Immigration. There's only one reason. That's the reason.
Housing prices, said Tucker, are the fault of immigration. Immigration alone, he said, although he did say demand and supply played a part. Immigration. Let's create some hatred for the poor old immigrants. Tucker's line on immigrants, of course, were, I like immigrants, but everything's I like, but. His little special appeal to Australian audience. Australians are such suckers for somebody from overseas, some big noter like Tucker, saying, I just love Australia, what a great country, what great people you are, and then proceed to put the boot in for entirely the wrong reasons. The next one was energy prices, of course. I couldn't believe how high energy prices were, and he's right. There's always an element of truth in what he says. I tend to agree with him. He's revised his position on the invasion of Iraq. That's good. I agree with him on he's a critic of US militarism, military interventions all over the world. That's good. When it comes to specifics, he's not much chop. It's all charisma and outrage statements. Energy prices, he said, were the fault of course, renewable energy.
So why do you have such high energy costs? Well, because we sell our coal to China, which uses it to make renewables, which we then buy back.
Now, of course, who was paying Tucker to be out here? The Australian Freedom Forum was the organisation. He was funded by little Clive Palmer, coal and mining billionaire. Little Clive Palmer. That was the ticket. So he's not going to bag coal, is he? He's a science denier anyway, Tucker. None of that namby-pamby windmills and renewable energies for Tucker. That appeals to a sort of Sky News audience. Coal is cheaper than renewables. He said, look, in Australia, thermal coal, you've got loads of it. Another statement which was true. Forget the climate for a sec. Forget the emissions. That is a fact. We do have a lot of thermal coal and met coal as well. But the fact is, as any expert worth their salt will tell you, solar and wind, the price of new solar and wind capacity became cheaper than coal 10 years ago. And the deflation in those prices has surprised even the big fans of solar energy. It's defied all expectations. It has plummeted as battery technology has got better. Building new coal will be much more expensive. As for nuclear, we won't get onto that. But the fact is, it's just a lie. It's a Tucker outright lie. Just lying to his thousands of fans. We've got plenty of coal, so it must be cheap. Yes, but of course you have to build a coal-fired power plant. Forget about the emissions. What does that cost? You've got to pay royalties on the coal. Just Disneyland stuff. His other one, which was an absolute rip snorter, was that China should take over Australia. I would, he said, if I was Xi Jinping, China should take over Australia. Why not? Abundant resources. Look at you guys, you're great people. They'd love it down here. And of course, there was the misogyny as well as the sort of immigrant bashing and the xenophobia. The former New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, who he called Jacinda Ardern, deliberately mispronouncing her name, even though this guy's a trust fund baby who went to school at Collège du Le Mans near Lake Geneva in Switzerland. What a hypocrite.
Like if I ever went to New Zealand, I wouldn't mention Jacinda Ardern or what, you know what I mean? That would be rude. I wouldn't say like, oh, that retarded girl with the teeth, is she here? You know, I wouldn't. That would be, no, I wouldn't.
Here they are to all his fans. They're trying to take away your country. They are taking away your country, he said. Who are they? Well, you know, global elites and all this sort of far right-wing nonsense. And the guy's level of analysis. But he's smart enough, he just does not want to go there. He doesn't want to complicate the message with facts. Just tells fairy tales. So following the money, here's a guy whose trip was sponsored by little Clive Palmer, the mining billionaire, right-wing guy. Clive has coal assets, so Tucker is talking up coal. But it's a hypocrisy which is mind-blowing. There he is, holding forth at the Australian Freedom Forum. And we don't know who else is funding the Australian Freedom Forum, but it's certainly a path forward for the fossil fuel industry, which has billions of dollars to spare. Useful media assets like Tucker Carlson, who will obviously say anything for self-promotion and $1. So he was talking Clivey's book. That's the guts of it. He's paying the piper. The point of the hypocrisy can't be lost, because if his formula was talking up Australians, his audience, saying they're great people and Australia's wonderful, he's really loving it out here, but these massive criticisms of the they, he absolutely smashed the Labor government, of course, because it's Labor and he's a right-winger. Look at America. Look at your own backyard, chap. America, the country, this country where 1 in 4 cancer patients go bankrupt, where money, billionaires and corporations control the politicians outright. Literally hundreds of thousands of dollars to each politician, almost every one of them on Capitol Hill, senators and congressmen from the likes of IPAC, the pro-genocide mob, and the National Rifle Association, the NRA. They've been bought off. Capitol Hill is bought off. There is no arguing it. And we are heading in Australia in the wrong direction. British Parliament too. Just dig around and find out who owns who. It's always the money. They finance these politicians in Tucker's homeland to the point where they're happy to finance a genocide and wreck America's prestige in the world simply from their own financial and political self-interest. For good. It's gone. This from a guy, Tucker, who will not look at the facts on guns in a country where 327 people are shot every day on average, 23 of them children on average, as a direct result of Tucker and co. kowtowing to the gun lobby. Freedom to kill people. More gun dealers than there are McDonald's in America. More guns than there are people by a wide margin. A country which can't even protect its own school children from being shot at school. This, Tucker, from a country which has been responsible, and to give him credit, Tucker, he's been a critic of all the military, or some of the military excursions. This country responsible for millions of deaths worldwide in its military intervention, undermining foreign governments, yet can't even provide healthcare to its own people. And this from a guy whose country can't even prosecute high-end pedophile rings. Jeffrey Epstein not only can't prosecute them, won't investigate them, despite clear documentary evidence like the recent logs that were released by a court in the US, showing leading, well-known household name figures taking Epstein junkets to pedophile Ireland. Nothing is being done about it. It's no wonder people are suspicious about authority. He always chooses the conspiracy over the stuff up every time, whether it's vaccines or climate or energy or housing. He hits some good points, Tucker, but he makes the wrong conclusions as to blame. There are large elements of truth in what he says, like, your politicians are not very expensive to buy, he said. Yes, and guess who led the way? You and your politicians over in America. So that is the moral of the story. That's the next leg, because Tucker, he must have really got some votes for Dutton during his time here. And off he goes back to his country or off to some other country to tell people half-truths. So we hate to say it again, but if you want to get a balanced view, regardless of their creed, their political agendas, what party they're in, then like, share or comment, throw us a few bucks on Patreon.